Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks again to Lingva Farm for the kind invitation. So I will try in the next 20 minutes to give you an introduction about the work of the Council of Europe on EDQM for a project for anti-counterfeiting. So it's a project for traceability service for medicines called ETACT. And I have first to give you some background information about our organization and why we have launched this project, which fits well with the purpose of this conference today. The Council of Europe is an organization founded in 1949 with 47 member states. And as you can see, Russia is a member of the Council of Europe. This organization deals with human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And because one of the basic human rights is public health, the Council of Europe is the mother organization for the EDQM, or European Directorate for the Quality of Medicines and Healthcare, which was founded at that time as the Secretariat of the European Pharmacopoeia in 1964. So this organization deals or used to deal only with the quality of medicines, but because of the growing threat of counterfeit medicines, we have started elaborating what we call an anti-counterfeiting strategy. So of course I will focus on the traceability aspect of this strategy against counterfeit products or falsified products, falsified medicines. But let me give you a couple of words about the other activity we develop in this area. We have a lot of training programs for inspectors, for custom officers, for enforcement officers, police forces in different countries. We dedicate some of our resources, or actually some resources of our national member states in inspection and testing, focusing on counterfeit and falsified products. We have this on the top of the slide, right-hand side, you have the Medicrime Convention. So let me give you a couple of words on that. It's a convention also signed by Russia, because it's open for signature by all Council of Europe member states, and actually any country in the world can sign it. It's a convention elaborated by the Council of Europe that makes the manufacturing and supply, distribution, dispensing of counterfeit medicines or counterfeit medical devices as well a crime, and not only an infringement to property rights. So hence the name of the convention, Medicrime Convention. So maybe I can go quite quickly through this, but just to stress that the main aim is to make this a crime, so that the penalties against counterfeiters, so the makers, the distributors of falsified and counterfeit medicines are can be punished with penalties that are an incentive them for not entering this business. Because today this is a problem that they make a huge profit, and the penalties are not high enough to discourage them to go into this business. So this is a map of the countries that have signed the convention. So we are around 25 countries signing it, and 2 of them have ratified the convention. Ukraine and Spain, and I've checked with my colleagues in charge of this matter at the Council of Europe, and Russia, the Duma is checking the ratification process right now, and because as you know, the opening of the signature of this convention, as you might know, was done in Moscow in a conference held last year by the Council of Europe. So that's one element of the fight against counterfeiting, one major element, the Medicrime Convention, and the legal instruments to sue counterfeiters and rogue actors in the pharmaceutical market. The other aspect is to develop traceability systems, as the ones described by the former speakers today. To give you background information about what's going on in the other European countries, and mainly in the European Union, There is a directive at EU level which regards then the 28 member states of the European Union, a directive that impose or will impose by 2018 or end of 2017 or early 2018, directive that will impose that safety features are affixed to each packs of prescription medicines in Europe. So we're talking about something like 10 billion of packs a year. And this safety feature should consist of an identifier that should be readable by wholesaler distributors and pharmacists, and any persons allowed to dispense medicines to patients, and a tamper-proof device or a seal that gives evidence that the pack hasn't been tampered. In our project, we focus on the identifier aspect. And I will get back to that. It's the barcode, as described before. And the regulatory process is that there was a public consultation after end of 2011, early 2012, and there is an impact assessment or an impact study realized now by the European Commission in Brussels that should lead to EU legally binding text, which is called a delegated act. So this is for the regulatory background. Back to the ETAC project, the EDQM project, the scope is that it should be able, technically speaking, to cover any pharmaceutical product, because even in the EU directive, there are rooms for also covering non-prescription medicines, if needed. The scope is, of course, covering all licensed actors in the pharmaceutical supply chain, so those holding a license from national authorities, and also the patients. And the scope, as you can see, covers the 37 member states of the European Pharmacopoeia, so the European countries that have signed up the European Pharmacopoeia Agreement. So the countries where the European Pharmacopoeia standards and norms for pharmaceutical products are mandatory for manufacturing pharmaceutical products. As you can see, Russia, the Federation of Russia, is an observer to this to the European Pharmacopoeia. So Russia attends the European Pharmacopoeia meetings and takes note of the legal texts and follows the same standards, but they are not mandatory per se in Russia yet. Technically speaking, what is the project about? We're talking about, again, an identifier that is put on the secondary packaging of the packs. So you need to have on this identifier different elements. The first one is, I will try to stress this, yes, it's this one. The element called the GTIN, which stands for Global Trade Item Number. It's a standard created by the organization, the global organization GS1, formerly used mainly for logistic tracing, but that could be used as well, of course, for anti-counterfeiting, tracing, dispensing electronic records, and so on for medicinal products. So the idea would be to use this widely recognized standard for identifying the products, and by product I mean product name, brand name, strength, presentation, and so on. And then you need to add to that a serial number, which is an alphanumeric number, and then if possible, if necessary, and we recommend to have this as well, batch number and expiry date. And if needed, last but not least, what we call a national health reimbursement number, which is again a new standard developed by the same organization, GS1, to cover the scenario of countries keeping a national product identification code, which is the case in numerous countries because of the pre-existing reimbursement systems for medicines. So for instance, you have in France the CIP, in Germany the PZN, and so on and so on. So you have many different product identifiers in different European countries. And in US, for instance, you have the NDC. There is a long list of potential national numbers that will remain in use even if we harmonize the product identification using a standard like GS1 GTIM. So all combined, these numbers makes what we call a unique medicine identifier, or UMI. And this is to be put on the pack in a human readable form and in a machine readable form, a 2D barcode. Because again, because of the number of information you have coded, you need to have a 2D barcode. The other technical option is an RFID tag, which is an option we have regarded as a definitely appealing option, but quite costly, to be honest, compared to a barcode. So for the time, and plus there are some technical issues with RFID tag in terms of reliability when you use the tags to trace a large palette of medicines, of medicinal packs. So in terms of the what the system would achieve, it's about identifying the packs at the level of the manufacturers, and then at least verifying the packs at the point of dispensing, the pharmacy, so with the verification process, verification of the UMI. But we think that it's risky to only rely on these two ends of the supply chain to trace pharmaceutical packs because of what we know about incident in the legal supply chain with counterfeit medicines. There is a need to also foresee at least the possibility to trace the pharmaceutical packs within the supply chain at intermediates in the supply chain between the manufacturers and the pharmacy. And for that, then the wholesalers, the distributors, the pre-wholesalers, the repackager have to be involved in at least being able to read the information and, if necessary or if possible, to capture information for tracing medicinal packs and securing the supply chain. One other aspect in the project is to cover the internet and mail order pharmacies in the countries where these are authorized, which depends on the countries, of course, because it's sovereign decision by national authorities to allow or not the dispensing by mail order. But if this is the case, then of course the same requirements apply to community pharmacies as well as to internet and mail order pharmacies. Another very important aspect in our project is to give the option to the patients to also identify or to verify the packs. The main responsibility or the entire responsibility for ensuring, securing the supply chain lies with the authorities and the business stakeholders, the economic operator of the supply chain. But we think that the patients should be given the possibility to verify. I mean, first it's for them then an incentive or yes, an insurance given to them, visibly given to them that there is an action done by the member states authorities and the business stakeholders. So it's an incentive for them not to go to the illegal supply chain, to illegal internet pharmacies. And it's really a matter of involving the patient, empowering the patients in securing the supply chain. There are discussions, and I think there is a speaker tomorrow talking about the US project for pedigree or system in US with a recent law. In Europe, for the time being, because of the difficulties to the technical difficulties to implement a full track and trace system or a pedigree system, the consensus is more to go first to at least verification at pharmacy level, if possible, and possibly enlarging the scope to risk-based approach for tracing in the supply chain, but definitely not to go right now for a full track and trace system. So I could maybe skip that slide, which is about the IT architecture. I will not go into the details for reason of times, but just be aware that there will be definitely and probably national databases, and there will be some centralization if needed, if possible, if wished and agreed by the member state authorities. And you have also in the background the database of the manufacturers. So the architecture has to be well designed and approved by all stakeholders. In terms of patient access, just to focus on that, the increased involvement of patients is a wish even expressed by the pharmaceutical industry, so that patients can play an active role in not only being passive recipients of information and care. So they have to, the patients represented by patients' organizations have to be partners and stakeholders, and not only just the ultimate recipients of medicines. And we should develop and further develop their awareness about the risks getting to illegal internet pharmacies. There are incentives for them because of prices and so on, but definitely there is a need for educating the patients about these risks, and by involving them, that's definitely a way to educate patients about these risks. So the focus on the patient application we have developed in our project, it's technically speaking, we're talking about a verification using a mobile phone. So of course the level of information is quite critical because the patient is not able to really make his own assessment. So actually you might provide the patient with quite a lot of information, but the main message is that the patient should either be said that the medication is compliant, or in case of any suspicion or any recall or any evidence already about counterfeited medicines, the patient should be told to liaise with his pharmacist, his or her pharmacist. That's definitely the only advice to be given to patients in case of any suspicion, because again, it's not up to the patients to make any risk assessment or whatsoever. Of course, then you can provide him with the information about what has been read in the barcode, but definitely the main advice is to get back to the pharmacist in case of any problem. One very critical discussion point right now in the project and in implementation of the EU directive is the matter of governance. What do we mean by governance? It's about who should be behind these systems in terms of securing the data, in terms of setting up the systems, in terms of running the systems, maintaining them, auditing them, and so on. Of course, you have to have a quite comprehensive governance. You have to have the business stakeholders involved, because we're talking about systems interface for daily use. And by daily use, I mean 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In systems interfacing with systems of manufacturers, systems of distributors. So we're talking about enterprise resource planning systems like, not to name brand names, but we can talk about SAP for manufacturers. Then you have the pharmacy point of sale systems, and so on and so on. So these stakeholders must be involved in the development, setting up, running, maintenance of these systems, because again, they are interfaced on a daily basis with their own systems. So they have to have the highest possible technical and executive role in running these systems. But our analysis at the EDQM is that the authority should be given a supervisory role in, again, supervising or governing the system. This is what we talk about governance, associating the patients' organizations. And of course, this is one model of governance. There are numerous different models, and the discussion right now are going on about where to draw the line, if there is a line to draw between authorities, stakeholders, third-party organizations, standardization organization, and so on. So in terms of where we are in the project, of course, well, I don't know if you will have tomorrow or this afternoon. I'm not sure. There should be a presentation by the European Stakeholder Model project, which is a project run by numerous stakeholders in Europe for the implementation of the EU directive. So of course there are different projects. There is also a project in Germany. There are existing systems in Belgium, Greece, and Turkey. So our own project should fit with this environment of different projects, because the aim is not to develop in the end several different systems that compete with each other, or that doesn't, with the risk of not interoperating with each other. So we have to develop something that fits with this environment in agreement with, again, in a comprehensive manner with the stakeholders and the authorities. So where we are now, we have developed a live demo system, which we have run for 2 years in different workshops with authorities and stakeholders to demonstrate the functionalities we envisage in a system. And this is where we are. We are ending this phase called the live demo phase, and we are working on a project for developing a pilot phase in at least one European country to really test the system in a real environment. I mean, the live demo system has already been developed using real IT systems, a real ERP system for manufacturers, a real point-of-sale system for pharmacies. But still, there is a need to make the system robust enough to be deployed in the real environment at real scale over the next, well, 2 to 3 or even 4 years. So to summarize, there is a need. What we try to achieve in this project at EDQM is to create a harmonized approach for a system which is interoperable and flexible, thanks to the use of existing standards and not creating new standards. And here we're talking about ISO standards, GS1 standards, like the data matrix barcode. We need to develop something which secure the data, and because it's we're talking about securing the supply chain, but also handling very sensitive information, because it's the information about manufacture and distribution and dispensing of medicines. So this is why we think that because of the risk of conflict of interest, there is a need to have a public governance, integrating the business stakeholders, but under supervision of authorities. And we think that there is a need to allow patients to verify the medicines as well, and to involve them in this project at this level. And thanks again for your attention.